Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Wednesday, the 6th of March, comes to you from London. And the dollar continuing its climb, so looking short-term bullish again. We will get a new thrust target off this new upward column. We've got a 3% upside target here for the dollar, and some quite big upside targets still in train on the longer-term chart. So we're bullish on all three time frames, just coming back into more clearly bullish on the medium-term chart. As time goes on, we will wander out on the lagging line. So dollar bullish is still the theme, and that means the euro is looking weaker against the dollar, bearish on all three time frames. So euro weakness creeping back in. Against the yen, we see the dollar continuing to be in the bullish state. It has been flat the last few days. The yen is normally a safe haven as well. So we are just seeing that the two currencies following each other quite closely. This will be a sign for any turn down in the dollar, but at the moment it's looking still pretty bullish. Sterling is weaker against that stronger dollar, and back to bearish on the short-term chart. We've got a target back to the 130 level, and against the euro, sterling is now weakening a little bit as well. So we are just seeing a weakness there, and the Swiss franc also much the same picture. Looking at Bitcoin, we see that's jumped yesterday to short-term bullish, but still a terrible looking chart in the medium and long term. The US market, the S&P 500 index, is looking short-term bullish. Still, we did have a little bit of a sell-off yesterday, so we're just starting to see the first signs of a red candle for a weekly move here. All right, we're only part of the way through the week, but this is just starting to show a little bit of weakness. We saw that opening yesterday quite weak. We're still in bull trend, but we're just seeing the market running into a little bit of a headwind on that short-term chart. The same on the Nasdaq. And on the Dow as well, just down slightly yesterday. And the Russell 2000 index also just showing a sell-off and just starting to come below the clouds. So we're seeing the broader based index suffering there. The futures this morning, the S&P future down 0.17%, the Nasdaq E-mini down 0.1%. So no real clear direction, but just slightly down looks to be very much the theme there. Looking at the Footsie 100 index, we see here we're up very slightly this morning, and it has put us back into bullish territory the last day or two. But and we do have some upside targets here, so the recovery looking okay, but we're just down slightly this morning. Market's fairly muted overall. The Footsie 250 down by 0.3%, and the DAX down by 1/3%. So we are just seeing a little bit of movement there. The CAC current also lower. Japan was down 1/4% overnight, and the Hang Seng Index was up 1/4%, and the Chinese market continuing to rise up 1.5%, so looking pretty strong there. There is still a little bit of uncertainty in the region, and this latest news out of North Korea not helping probably. The Sensex was up 0.4%, and the Australian market was up 0.75%. So all in all, we have seen a fairly strong showing in the region. Brent crude is down 0.7%, so it's just unseasonably weak at the moment. We are just still bearish below the cloud. Haven't activated the downside targets here, so it's too early to say that we're going to see a sell-off in crude. And WTI also just looking bearish below the cloud. US nat gas sitting steady at $2.88, short-term bullish, but medium and long-term the charts don't look great. Gold recovering a little bit this morning. We were nudging that 1280 level. We are still bearish below the cloud. Stronger dollar hasn't been helping here, but at the moment we're medium and well, certainly medium-term bullish. The long-term chart, it could be argued the lagging line is just hitting some resistance. We've got to see how we seesaw within this cloud at the moment. So still an interesting picture. We've got a downside target. We'll have an upside target on this column as well. It will be a case of which way does gold break, and we have to wait for that to play out. Silver is looking a bit weaker, and US 10-year yield sitting at 2.72%, just pushing back to short-term bearish, and the German bond market actually looking a bit better on the actual bond prices themselves. This data all coming to you from Thomson Reuters Icon, or if you're using Metastock Zenith, which is a very good alternative. It's the same data as Thomson Reuters Icon, and very cost-effective solution for private investors. Taking a look at the stocks themselves. Here I'm using data from Yahoo Finance coming into Updata version 10, and we start by looking at the Dow last night and just clicking on the percentages. United Healthcare Group were the best performer, up 2.3%. Chart not looking great on that medium term and really has taken a dive this year. These charts all now rebased to the start of the year at 100, so we've underperformed the market so far this year by 13%. The long-term trend just starting to come under pressure here, looking like a lower high and potentially a lower low. If we make new lows there, that's signaling the end of the trend, and the daily chart is already showing that up. Chevron were the second best performer, up 1%, and they're looking a little bit better as a chart. We've got some upside targets on the medium term, and we're fairly flat on the relative. On the downside, we had Walgreens down 2%. So here, this chart not looking at all good. And again, we've underperformed the Dow by 15% here. So we're seeing that showing through. If we look at some other stocks here, Microsoft, for example, looking a little bit better against the charts here, pushing for that new all-time high, looking better on the medium term. Haven't quite performed as well as the Dow index, but we've still got some quite good upside targets there. Looking at the tech stocks generally, we've got Alphabet in the Nasdaq 100. Alphabet were up 1.2%. On the A shares. Amazon was down 0.2%, and so just struggling to back into that medium-term territory. Apple were down slightly as well, but still looking like a recovery, and Facebook were up 2%. So we are seeing a bit of a resurgence in Facebook, and we've got upside targets. This upside target not yet activated. The big performers yesterday were Ctrip.com. That really rocketed up 20%. Willis Towers were up 5%, and so that chart looking really amazing as well. And NetEase just not quite recovering there. Beidou Inc. up 4%, not looking great. The worst performers in the Nasdaq, Align Technology down 6%, and Monster Beverage also weak. Long-term and medium-term charts still looking pretty okay. And we see Tesla there, they were also down 3% yesterday. That chart starting to look a little bit worrying. Bearish on the medium and long term, and underperforming the Dow so far this year by 15%, so not looking great there. The Aussie market overnight, we had Western Areas Limited, they were up 6.8%. Independence Group were up 5.8%. Quite good looking charts here in Oz. Pilbara Minerals, they were up 5%. Not as good a looking chart here in the medium long term. And we see the relative has declined over a period. Looking at the worst performers, we had Automotive Holdings down 3%, and that chart looking terrible. Ardent Ledger down 3.4%. China, we had a pretty strong showing, as we said. The securities companies up. As here we have Shenzhen Securities up 10%. The medium-term chart looking pretty good. The long-term chart has work to do. Targets that were given have been met, so hard to see the next one. CTEC Securities, they were up 7.6%. Again, this chart looking amazing. They've gone from 15 to 27, virtually doubled in the last couple of months. And China Galaxy Securities we're seeing also. So a lot of those securities companies really rising, and we're seeing that really all the way down. If we look at the worst performers, there were only a handful. China Fortune Land Development down 1.86%, but the medium-term chart still looking pretty good. In India, the Nifty 50, we had Bharat Petroleum up 2.6%. The chart not looking great. Vedanta we see is up 2.4%. Here we see the live prices coming in from Yahoo. I have my system set every minute to just pull the latest prices in, so that I've always got the latest prices on my chart. Tata Motors on the other end of the scale, they were down 2.6%, trying to recover on the medium-term chart. We have got an upside target here, but really, and the relative might well be turning, just one to keep an eye on. Taking a look over over to Europe now. We start by looking at the Footsie 100, the top 100 UK stocks. Bats are up 4%. That's the best performer this morning in the FTSE. Not quite managing to get into recovery mode, though. Have had a terrible relative over the last 12 months. And if we look at DS Smith, again, they're up nearly 4% this morning, but really just starting to look like a recovery there. Interesting, we're seeing the tobacco brands, Imperial brands, they're up 2% this morning, and again, they're just starting to look like a recovery. On that 0.5% point and figure chart, we are just seeing some upside targets there as well. So interesting that. Remember that you can do this on any company. So this is my long term, my medium term, and my short term view. And WPP here we see teetering along the bottom. They're up nearly 1% this morning, but that's not really changing the chart. Taking a look at the downside, we've got Legal and General, they're down 3.7%. Burberry are down 3%. So we are still seeing some pretty poor performances here. Paddy Power down 1.5%, and again, their chart has really struggled over the last year or so. We see that again showing up in the relative. And Intertech Group looking a little bit better on the charts, but still a bit of a seesaw, quite a hard one to read. We see some of the banks here, Lloyd's as well. So quite a mix, but quite a lot of stocks falling there. Looking at the 250, so this is the mid caps in the UK. Best performer, Ultra Electronics Group, up 7%. So that's looking pretty good. Elementis up 4%. The chart not looking great though, and Funding Circle up 4% again. Chart not much data here because it's a recent listed stock. Tullow Oil up 3%. And in fact, just wandering through the clouds, starting to look a little bit better on that medium-term chart. The long-term chart's not showing a very clear trend. And Metro Bank have had all sorts of woes and still look pretty bearish on the chart, despite being up 2.5% this morning. Taking a look at the downside in the 250, IWG down 4%. Just Eat have announced results this morning, down 3%. The chart looking a little bit better on that medium term. We've got an upside target potential of 3 and 7%, but the long-term chart just not quite managing to make it through. Looking at the Euro stocks, this is the top 50 stocks in Europe. Best performer is Enel in Italy, up 1% this morning. That chart looking pretty good. Total in France up 0.5%, so we're seeing some improvement there. And Telefonica up nearly 0.5% as well. Vivendi up 0.3%. If we go to the other side of the coin, we've got ING in Holland down 2.7%, not looking great on that long-term chart. Daimler in Germany also just still looking pretty weak long-term, although the medium-term is recovering. Maybe we're seeing a bit of a turn here in the relative, and we have got some upside targets. We've got BMW, they're falling as well, and Volkswagen. We're seeing motor companies, by the looks of things, Daimler, BMW and Volkswagen all lower this morning in the run-up to Geneva Motor Show as well. Anyway, that's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.